Let me ask you something uncomfortable, and I need you to really sit with this question. Not just hear it, but feel it. When was the last time you came home from work and felt proud of what you were about to do next? Not proud of the job, not proud of hitting someone else's deadline or surviving someone else's meeting. Proud of yourself, proud of the direction your own life was heading. If that question made you a little uneasy, good. That feeling, that's not weakness. That's your gut telling you something your brain has been too exhausted to admit. Because here's what Warren Buffett understood decades ago, something he figured out in a quiet room in Omaha while the rest of the world was doing what the rest of the world always does after 6 p.m. He figured out that the greatest financial crime in modern history isn't committed by Wall Street. It isn't committed by banks. It isn't committed by governments. It is committed every single evening in living rooms across the world by ordinary people who have been sold the most comfortable, most dangerous lie of the modern age. And the lie is this: work hard from 9 to 5, be loyal, be patient, and someday you'll be rewarded. That's a promise, isn't it? That's a deal you were handed by your school, by your parents, by every corporate orientation you ever sat through. Work the hours, trust the system, climb the ladder. And I want to be careful here because I'm not saying work is beneath you. I'm not saying your job doesn't matter. What I am saying is what Buffett has been saying quietly for the better part of 70 years. The hours between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. will keep you alive. But the hours between 6 p.m. and midnight, those will determine whether you ever actually live. I want you to picture a specific person right now. Maybe it's someone you know, maybe, and this is the one that really stings, maybe it's you. He's 38, works in finance or logistics or IT, or maybe just a regular 9 to 5 that pays the bills and nothing more. He's not a bad person. He's actually incredibly hardworking. He shows up early. He stays late sometimes. He genuinely tries. He comes home at 6:15 every evening. And the moment he walks through that door, something happens to him. The weight of the day doesn't just slow him down, it flattens him. His shoulders drop. His jaw unclenches for the first time in 8 hours. He loosens his collar. And somewhere between the front door and the couch, a decision is made. Not consciously, not with any real intention. A decision is just made. The TV turns on. The phone comes out. The scroll begins. And 3 hours later, he looks up and wonders where the evening went. And then he goes to bed. And then he does it again tomorrow. Now, here's what makes this genuinely heartbreaking. And I mean this sincerely. This man is not lazy. He's not stupid. He's not failing because of some character flaw. He's exhausted. He's genuinely exhausted. And the system, the exact system that takes 8 of his best hours every single day, has also engineered the perfect trap for the other 8. Buffett often talks about how the greatest fortunes in the world aren't built on talent alone. They're built on understanding where other people's attention goes, and the uncomfortable truth, your attention in those evening hours is worth billions of dollars, just not to you. Visual, split screen, Netflix, autoplay countdown, Instagram infinite scroll, food delivery app. Every app that autoplays, every algorithm that learns exactly what keeps your eyes open 5 minutes longer, every notification that pulls you back just when you are about to put the phone down. That is not an accident. That is architecture. That is the most sophisticated engineering of the 21st century, designed to capture the one thing you have that money cannot replace: your time. And here is the quiet tragedy that Buffett has watched play out over his entire lifetime. The middle class works 8 hours a day to make someone else rich, and then comes home and spends 6 more hours making someone else richer, and wonders, at the end of it all, at 60, at 65, sometimes at 70, why the promise never came true, why the freedom never arrived. I met a man, I'll call him David, through a mutual acquaintance. David had worked for the same company for 31 years. He was respected there. He was good at his job. He retired at 64 with a pension and a party and a plaque that said, "Thank you for your service." 3 months after he retired, David called his son and said something that broke his family's heart. He said, "I don't know who I am without the job." 31 years, and the only thing he had built was someone else's institution. That is the cost no one puts on the spreadsheet. That is the tax no one talks about in the financial planning brochure. Buffett saw this coming, not just for one man, but for entire generations, and he made a very different choice. Now here's where we need to get a little scientific, because if you're going to change your evenings, you first have to understand why your brain fights against you so hard. Psychologists and neuroscientists have studied something called ego depletion. the phenomenon where willpower, self-control, and the capacity for good decision-making literally diminish throughout the day. Your willpower is not a muscle that stays strong. It's a battery, a finite charge. You wake up at 7 a.m. with a full battery, and then the day begins. The passive-aggressive email from your manager, battery drops 4%. The meeting that could have been an email, another 3%. The commute, the traffic, the decision of what to eat for lunch, the 1,000 micro-stresses you absorb without even noticing. By 6 p.m., most people are operating at somewhere between 15 and 20% battery. And this exact moment of daily depletion is when the modern economy strikes. Because the streaming services know, the social media companies know, the food delivery apps know. They have studied your behavior at 6 p.m. with the precision of a surgeon. They know that when you're tired, your resistance is low. They know that your depleted brain craves dopamine, quick, easy, effortless hits of pleasure that require nothing from you. Buffett believes, and he's said this in various forms throughout his life, that the single greatest threat to building wealth isn't a market crash. It isn't inflation. It isn't even bad investment choices. It's the failure to own your own attention. Psychologists call what most people do in this state revenge bedtime procrastination. You feel like the day was stolen from you. Your time, your energy, your choices. So at 11 p.m., you stay up watching one more episode, scrolling one more feed, eating one more thing you didn't need. Not because you're enjoying it, but because it feels like the only control you have left. I want to say this with real compassion. That's not freedom. That's sedation. And it costs more than you know. But here's the part of the psychology that almost nobody talks about. The part that actually gives you hope. Your brain at 6 p.m. is not empty. It's not broken. It is simply bored. Neuroscience has repeatedly shown that mental fatigue is highly task specific. You are exhausted by your job. You are not exhausted as a person. The moment you engage in something that feels meaningful, something you chose, something that challenges you in a way that matters to you, a completely different set of neural circuits activates. The fatigue doesn't vanish, but it moves to the background. And something else takes the foreground. Drive, curiosity, the quiet, electric feeling of building something that's yours. This is what Buffett has been doing every evening for 7 decades. And it's what Charlie Munger figured out even earlier, under some of the most brutal circumstances imaginable. Most people know Charlie Munger as the brilliant, sharp-tongued billionaire who sat beside Warren Buffett for decades. The man with the wit, the man with the wisdom, the man who built Berkshire Hathaway alongside one of the greatest investors in human history. But that image, that polished, comfortable image, tells you almost nothing about who Charlie Munger actually was. Because before he was a billionaire, Charlie Munger was a broken man. Not metaphorically broken, not going through a rough patch, broken, shattered. In the span of just a few years in his early life, Charlie went through a divorce that upended everything he knew. He lost his young son, a 9-year-old boy named Teddy, to leukemia. Watched him die. Couldn't stop it. Couldn't fix it. He was financially wiped out. He was emotionally devastated. He was living in a cramped apartment, carrying grief that most people never experience in an entire lifetime. And every single morning, he put on a suit and went to his law firm. He sat across from wealthy clients. He solved their complex legal problems. He gave them his sharpest thinking, his clearest arguments, his most exhausting hours. And every evening, hollowed out, grieving, running on the fumes of a man who had lost almost everything that mattered, he came home. And here is where the story either becomes tragedy or legend. Charlie made a decision in those quiet, dark evening hours. A decision that had nothing to do with motivation, nothing to do with feeling ready, nothing to do with the circumstances being right. He asked himself one question: who is the most important client I'm working for? And the honest answer, the one that changed his life, was not the law firm. It was not the clients, it was Charlie Munger. So he did something that went against every instinct his exhausted body had. He carved out 1 hour, just 1 hour every single evening. Before the television, before the distraction, before the exhaustion could fully claim the night. And in that hour, he studied. Not law, he was already a brilliant lawyer. He studied business, real estate, finance, human psychology, the mechanics of how money actually moved through the world. He called it paying yourself first. Not with money, but with time. The most valuable currency in the universe. And slowly, not quickly, not dramatically, but slowly, those hours compounded. Not into immediate wealth, not into overnight success, but into something even more powerful, a mind that saw things other people couldn't see, a perspective that no one else in the room had, a depth of understanding that eventually made him invaluable, not just as a lawyer, but as a thinker, an investor, a builder of lasting wealth. Charlie Munger did not become Charlie Munger because he was born gifted. He became Charlie Munger because in the darkest evenings of his life, when every excuse to give up was valid and every reason to numb the pain was understandable, he chose to invest in himself instead. And then there's Buffett himself. Warren Buffett believes, and has said repeatedly in interviews, in letters to shareholders, in almost every public conversation he's ever had, that the single most important investment he ever made was not in a stock. It was in himself. People look at Buffett's wealth and assume genius. They assume some supernatural ability to read the market, to see the future, to understand something about money that ordinary humans simply cannot access. But here's what Buffett actually did. He read every evening for hours, when his neighbors were on their porches after dinner, when the rest of Omaha was settling into the comfortable rhythms of the evening. When the reasonable thing, the human thing, was to rest, Buffett was at his desk. Annual reports, balance sheets, business histories, industry analyses, the kinds of documents that make most people's eyes glaze over within 90 seconds. He has said he committed to reading roughly 500 pages a day during his formative years. Not always easy reading, not always exciting reading. Reading that required the kind of sustained, deep focus that is simply impossible in the middle of a noisy, interrupted workday. According to Buffett's philosophy, the real work, the work that built everything, happened in those still, quiet evening hours. He wasn't smarter than the analysts on Wall Street. He will tell you that directly. He was more focused, he was more disciplined, and he was doing the work when no one else was watching and when no one else was working. That asymmetry, that gap between what he was doing at 8 p.m. and what his competitors were doing at 8 p.m., compounded over years into something that looked, from the outside, like magic. It wasn't magic, it was math. And then there's Steve Wozniak. In the mid-1970s, Wozniak was working at Hewlett-Packard. A good job, a real job, designing calculators, doing serious engineering work, surrounded by smart people. By every metric, he should have been satisfied. But every evening, he went home and did something that had nothing to do with HP's products, nothing to do with his job description, nothing to do with any obvious financial reward. He went to his workbench. He soldered circuits that didn't need to exist. He wrote code for machines that didn't yet have a market. He built primitive computers in a garage for the sheer, almost childlike joy of it. Not because a manager told him to, not because there was a deadline, because it was fun, because it energized him in a way that the workday never could, because it was his version of active relaxation, the kind of engagement that looks like work to everyone on the outside, but feels like play from the inside. That garage, those evenings, that obsessive, joyful, completely voluntary investment of his most creative hours. You know what it became, and here's the thing that Buffett would want you to understand about Wozniak's story. It wasn't the talent that created Apple, it was the evenings. I want to address something directly because I know what some of you are thinking right now. This sounds like you want me to come home from a full day of work and then work for 5 more hours. That's not rest, that's burnout. And if that's what you're thinking, I hear you completely. But I need to make a distinction that most productivity advice completely misses. A distinction that Buffett's philosophy is built around. Even if he doesn't always use these exact words, the distinction between passive relaxation and active relaxation. Passive relaxation is what most people default to in the evening. Television, social media, alcohol, video games. These are not inherently evil, but they share one critical characteristic. You are consuming. You are in pure reception mode. You are a vessel being filled with other people's content, other people's stories, other people's agenda. And here's the uncomfortable truth about passive relaxation. It doesn't actually restore you. Studies on sleep quality and mental recovery consistently show that people who spend their evenings in passive screen consumption wake up the next morning feeling more fatigued, not less, more anxious, more disconnected, more like they've missed something important because they have. Active relaxation is different. Active relaxation means engaging your mind in a challenge that you chose, something that stretches you in a direction you care about, something where you are in control. For Buffett, active relaxation is reading a financial report the way a detective reads a crime scene. It doesn't feel like labor. It feels like a puzzle. It feels like play. For Wozniak, it was soldering circuits in a garage. For Charlie Munger in those dark years, it was reading business histories and real estate analyses long after his law clients had gone to bed. Active relaxation is the secret weapon that most people never find, because the easiest option is always passive. The couch is always closer. The remote is always within reach. But if you can find the thing that looks like work to everyone else but feels like play to you, the skill you develop even if no one was paying you, the problem you'd solve even if no one was watching, then the evening stops being a battleground. It becomes the best part of your day. Now, let's get specific, because inspiration without architecture is just noise. Buffett often talks about the importance of systems over willpower. He doesn't rely on motivation to read every morning. He built a life where reading is simply what he does. The system removes the decision. So here is the exact blueprint for your evening, a framework built on Buffett's habits, Munger's principles, and the neuroscience of peak cognitive performance, 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. The disconnect. This hour is not wasted. This hour is sacred. The biggest mistake people make when trying to reclaim their evenings is they try to go from employee to entrepreneur the moment they walk through the door. It doesn't work. The brain doesn't flip like a switch. So the first hour, 6 to 7, is the decompression chamber. The moment you walk in, change your clothes. This isn't just practical, it's psychological. You are physically removing the identity of the employee. You're shedding the uniform. Eat something real, not takeout scrolled through a food app, not leftovers eaten standing over the sink. Sit down. Eat with intention. Take a walk around the block if you can. Even 10 minutes of movement clears cortisol, drops stress hormones, and begins to reset your nervous system. And here is the single most important rule of the disconnect. Do not talk about your workday, not to your partner, not to your kids, not on the phone, not in your own head. The moment you replay the day, the frustrating meeting, the difficult client, the politics, the commute, you reactivate the same neural stress pathways that depleted you in the first place. Let it go. It will be there tomorrow. Tonight, you are the CEO of a different company entirely. By 7 p.m., you should feel something subtly different. A quiet shift, a loosening of the identity you wore all day. That shift is the signal. 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. The deep work window. This is the most important 2 hours of your day, not the morning meeting, not the afternoon review. This, from 7 to 9 p.m., you enter what researcher Cal Newport, whose work aligns powerfully with how Buffett describes his own study habits, calls a state of deep work, cognitively demanding, distraction-free, single-focus engagement with a task that matters to your own future. Phone goes in another room, not face down on the desk. Another room. The door is closed. You are unreachable for 120 minutes. The world will survive. And during this window, you are not working hard. You are not grinding. You are engaging in active relaxation. The thing that looks like work to others but feels to you like the most alive you felt all day. Maybe that's learning how to analyze a balance sheet. Maybe it's studying a real estate market. Maybe it's building a skill in digital marketing or coding or writing or graphic design. Maybe it's developing the framework for a small business you've been thinking about for 3 years. Whatever it is, it must be yours, not your employer's, not a second job, an investment in your own intellectual capital. Now, 2 hours might sound modest, but let me give you the math that Buffett's philosophy is built on. 2 hours a night, 5 nights a week. That's 10 hours per week. That's 40 hours per month. That's 500 hours per year of pure, focused, skill-building investment in yourself. 500 hours of deep work, compounding year after year while the people around you spend 500 hours watching fictional characters live fictional lives. After 1 year, the gap is barely visible. After 2 years, people start to notice something different about you. After 3 years, the compounding becomes undeniable. This is what Buffett means when he talks about the math of time. It is not dramatic, it is not fast, but it is inevitable. 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. The tomorrow setup. The final hour of your productive evening is not for more studying. It's for strategy. Here is a brutal truth that most people learn far too late. If you're deciding what to do in the morning, you have already lost the morning. The morning is for execution. The evening is for design. During this final hour, you do 3 things. First, you write down the 3 most important tasks for tomorrow, not a to-do list, not 20 items. 3. The 3 things that, if you accomplish nothing else, will have moved your life meaningfully forward. Second, you close every loop you can close. Respond to the one message you've been avoiding. Make the one decision you've been deferring. Set the one reminder that will stop you from wasting 20 minutes in the morning trying to remember what you were supposed to do. Third, you prepare your physical environment for tomorrow's version of yourself. Lay out the clothes, pack the bag, clear the desk so that when you sit down tomorrow evening for your next deep work window, there is no friction, no searching, no deciding. Buffett has said that he leaves his desk at the end of the night with one single document on it, aimed the one thing he will review first the next morning. Everything else is clear. Everything else is done. He is passing the baton to tomorrow's version of himself. That is the tomorrow setup, and by 10 p.m. earlier, if you can manage it, you are done. You are not a martyr. You are not grinding until 2 a.m. You are resting with the quiet, earned satisfaction of someone who spent their evening building something real. That is a completely different quality of rest than the person who numbed themselves for 4 hours and stumbled to bed feeling hollow. I need to be honest with you now, because if I only told you the blueprint and sent you on your way, I would be doing you a real disservice, because knowing what to do is not the hard part. The hard part is what happens in the weeks and months and years after you decide to do it. Here's what will happen when you start reclaiming your evenings. Your friends, the ones you genuinely like, the ones who mean well, will call you at 7:15 on a Tuesday night. Hey, we're heading out. You coming? And you'll say no, and they'll push a little. Come on, just for one drink. And you'll say no again. And at first they'll accept it with mild confusion, but over time, as the no's accumulate, as you keep showing up to your deep work window instead of the bar, as your life slowly and quietly starts to look different from theirs, the confusion will turn into something else. They'll start calling you obsessed. They'll say you're working too hard, that you need to relax, that you're missing out on life, and some of them, the ones who are most uncomfortable, will start to subtly, persistently, insistently try to pull you back. Not because they want to hurt you, but because your discipline is a mirror, and what it reflects is making them deeply, quietly uncomfortable. This is what I call the silent years. The first year, 2 years, maybe even 3, you will pour hundreds of hours into your evening work and see almost nothing in return. Your bank account will look the same. Your life from the outside will look the same. And there will be moments, late on a Wednesday, tired in a way that feels unfair, when you will genuinely wonder if any of it is worth it. This is the crucible. This is where it is decided, because compounding is invisible until it isn't. The first several doublings of a small number produce almost nothing visible, but the curve is there, beneath the surface, gathering momentum. Buffett has talked about this in the context of investing, but it applies to everything. The big money is not in the buying and the selling, but in the waiting. The same principle applies to skill, to knowledge, to the quiet, patient, unglamorous work of becoming someone different from who you were. You do not transform in a dramatic moment. You transform in the silent hours no one sees. And then one day, and this day will come if you don't quit and something shifts. The skill you built in the evenings gets noticed in a room that matters. The business you launched on $200 and Tuesday nights starts generating real revenue. The investment knowledge you accumulated reading reports on your couch suddenly lets you see an opportunity that no one around you can see. And the same friends who called you obsessed will look at what's happened to your life and call you lucky. They'll say you were at the right place at the right time. They will not mention the evenings. They did not see the evenings. But you know what the evenings cost, and you will know, in the quietest, most private place inside yourself, that luck had very little to do with it. I want to leave you with something that isn't a tip. It isn't a strategy. It isn't a blueprint. It's a question, and I want you to sit with it for more than just a moment. What would your life look like 3 years from now if every single evening between now and then you chose yourself? Not perfectly, not heroically, just consistently. An hour of reading, an hour of building, an hour of becoming someone your morning self can't yet imagine. Warren Buffett is 93 years old, and the wealth, the extraordinary, almost incomprehensible wealth, is not what he talks about when he talks about what made his life worth living. He talks about the joy of reading. He talks about the satisfaction of understanding something deeply. He talks about the compounding, not just of money, but of wisdom, of perspective, of the kind of mental richness that no market crash can ever take away. He figured out, very young, that the hours no one was paying him for were the most valuable hours he had, and he spent them accordingly. Charlie Munger spent his darkest evenings building his escape, not from grief. Grief doesn't have an exit, but from financial helplessness, from the condition of needing someone else's permission to determine his own future. Steve Wozniak built the device you might be watching this video on right now. Not in a boardroom, not with venture capital, not on company time, in a garage, in the evenings, for the love of it. These men are not superhuman. They are not mythological. They were tired people who made a different choice about what to do with the hours that belonged to them. And so the question I want to leave you with isn't, can you do this? You already know you can. The question is, when? Because the answer to that question, more than your education, more than your talent, more than any single investment decision you will ever make, the answer to that question is your future. Tonight, when the sun goes down and you walk through that door, stop. Look at the couch, look at the TV, look at the phone, and ask yourself quietly, honestly, who owns this time? Because it belongs to you. It has always belonged to you. The only question is whether you're going to claim it.